This podcast is a collaboration between Costard and Touchstone Productions and the Tales from the Crypt podcast.
I like you. You have balls.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. I'm Alan Katz. Gil will be with us shortly. Before we set sail, you know the routine. Hit the like button if there's one within hitting distance, but better yet, please subscribe to our podcast, to our YouTube channel, to our website. There is so much going on around here that I think you'll enjoy. I would be remiss if I let you miss it. We don't want that to happen, do we? Gil and I first worked with Jackie George, our guest, when we took over running Tales from the Crypt at the very start of season 3. Jackie worked for Warner Brothers and Silver Pictures at the time on movies like Die Hard, Richie Rich, and Demolition Man. Working for Joel took considerable balls to begin with, but for a woman working for Joel at the executive level, that took uber balls. Jackie was Joel's executive, his eyes and ears on various sets when he couldn't be there, kind of a fixer, like Ray Donovan, but with a lower body count. When you meet Jackie, her working for Joel seems like a total non-starter. On the one hand, you have an over-the-top, overbearing, egomaniacal movie producer with the attention span of a gnat. And on the other, an extremely competent, talented, smart woman with zero tolerance for other people's bullshit, especially when it's male bullshit. Yet, Jackie stuck it out with Joel for 3 years. And boy, does she have Joel stories to tell. Hollywood has changed a lot since Jackie first arrived from Erie, Pennsylvania by way of Boston in the late 1970s. It's no bedrock of equality and equal treatment today. But it really was a lot worse before, back when Jackie was learning the ropes and then trying to deal with all that unfairness. When Jackie first landed in LA, she knew very little about the movie business. All she did know was that she was a huge movie fan, enthralled by the flickering images up on the big screen. Her mission, somehow become part of its creation. Having an iron will, the willingness to take chances, and more balls than her 3 brothers combined, Jackie found her way into the movie business. In the mid-1980s, female executives were still too few and too far between. They had to be 3 or 4 times the producer any man was. And the icing on that disgusting cake, they also had to tolerate constant sexual predation from their coworkers and their bosses. Alas, the reason she had to tolerate it was because we all tolerated it and allowed it to flourish. But that's a conversation for another podcast, which we will. Jackie tells in this podcast how she successfully navigated those tricky shoals for as long as she could. Along the way, she experienced and saw some truly remarkable head-spinning things, some of the juiciest of which he's going to share here. It takes balls for anyone to conquer Hollywood in any way. It takes the biggest balls of all if you're female. Here's Jackie.
So how are you?
I'm pretty good. It's been a heck of a week. There's a lot of young filmmakers here, and I've been trying to help them out a lot. And one of them asked me if I knew movie magic, and I said, yeah, 100 years ago, So I took his script and broke it down, and I made a schedule, and I thought, oh, this is why I stopped doing this. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work,
Did you finish it?
It's a lot of work. I finished it yesterday, and now I'm going to meet with him, the writer-director, this week, and say, all right, now, how do you want to shoot this thing? Let's sort it out. Let's figure it out. Yeah, I did it. It comes back. It's like I don't know, it's like 100 years back there that you learned the program, but it came back. So it makes me feel good. Because my dad died from Alzheimer's, so every time I forget something, I'm like, uh-oh, watch out, watch out, But it's good to see you both. I think we've made it through the war, okay, right?
We're still sitting here, or wherever it is that we're sitting.
Yeah, exactly.
After your time in the wars, you went home to Erie.
I actually went home twice. I went home once, I took a sabbatical for 18 months. Because my dad had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and my father was a very Italian coach, athlete, and it was too much for my mom to handle. So I went back for just a short amount of time that ended to be 18 months. until we had to put him in a facility. And then I went back out to LA. And then unfortunately, I lost my oldest brother. And after my oldest brother passed away, my mom just went downhill. So it was at that time that I said, you know what? I think LA and I are done. I think the marriage to LA is over. And I came home and took care of my mom for about a year until she died. And so then I decided to stay.
What year was that?
I think it was about 7 years ago. And then, I came back and forth. I was going Erie, LA, go to San Francisco, see people, be in LA. And then when COVID hit, I haven't been out since before COVID.
Hmm.
So I'm trying to get out there this spring.
Well, if you do, well, hey,
Have a party.
absolutely. You all right, so but ultimately you've now come home to the place from whence you came.
Yes,
So you grew up in Erie?
I did. I grew up not too far from where I live now, about 5 or 6 blocks away from the bay, right at Lake Erie. And you forget as a kid how beautiful it is until you come back as an adult. And it's like, I live on Lake Erie, one of the Great Lakes. It's crazy, and it's so beautiful and it's vast and it's cold and it's hot. It's cold in the winter, but we've had unseasonably warm winters.
You're
But
you're
don't,
you're you're just
yeah.
down the road a piece from Buffalo.
We're between Buffalo and Cleveland, right on the lake. Yeah. Hmm.
Do you get the same kind of snow that Buffalo gets?
This year we haven't. I think we've only had 20 inches of snow. And I remember when I first came back, there were 8 feet. So,
Wow.
but don't tell anybody there's climate change because that's, we're not allowed to say that.
Oh, sorry.
No, no, I'm just being facetious, but you know what I'm saying.
As you were growing up in Erie, all right, at what point did you fall in love with movies and head out west? Where did all that come from?
Well, as a kid, our family backyard joined with another friend of my dad's named Vinnie Marchant, and his daughter Joanna and I was the stage manager at the Warner Theater. And the Warner Theater in Erie is one of the last standing theaters built by the brothers Warner. And it was a vaudeville house, and it's stunning. They've since put so many million to refurbish it, and it's gorgeous. But he was the stage manager, so every weekend he would let us sneak through the back door, and she and I would sit there all day Saturday and all day Sunday and watch movies. And my mom knew as long as I was there, I was okay. And sometimes we would stay for, it was a double feature and the cartoons and all that stuff. And I just thought that it was a thing that allowed me to get out of my head. And also my family it was a little tumultuous. My dad Italian, my mother Russian. It was like, there was a little of that going on. And so it was a great escape for me to go into that movie theater. And it was so beautiful. And I just felt like that was home.
Do you remember the
Mhm.
first movie that you saw? That
No, I'm not sure what I ate yesterday. So no, I can't, I don't remember. I just remember maybe it was a Western and maybe because my sister was older, it might have been Elvis and she told me I should go see it. I don't remember though. I just knew that image on the screen was pretty amazing. And if it could calm my crazy brain, I thought it was such a wonderful relief.
what made you think that you could be part of the process that created those images on the screen?
Maybe growing up here and realizing that as a woman, after a college, you could be a nurse or a secretary or a teacher. And I said, yeah, no, I don't think so. And I went to Boston first. I got married very young, and my ex-husband went to Berkeley School of Music, College of Music.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived there for a while. And then after he graduated, we said we could either move to New York or LA. And we decided the weather in LA was better. So we drove to LA, and I was very naive.
What
And
year
I
was
knocked
that?
on,
What year was that, Jackie? I'm sorry.
see, you're asking me facts. I can't even remember. I don't
Yeah.
know. I just know I was in my 20s. And
Well, then ballpark. Are we talking?
it's middle 70s, late 70s.
Okay, cool.
And then I went to, knocked on doors. Like I'd go to Paramount's human resources and say, I want a job. And they would look at me and like, yeah, right. Okay. You would have, but I did. I went to every single studio and applied for a job. And then I became a bartender at the Sheraton Universal Hotel. And I was the first female bartender they ever had. And everybody stayed there back then because of Universal's, the whatever that was, the amphitheater, I think.
Yeah.
So Telly Savalas lived in there at the time. The Eagles would stay there, the Harlem Glow, everybody stayed there. And there was a guy that came to the bar. He was living in the hotel at the time, I think going through divorce. And we became really good friends. And after a while, he said to me, what is a smart girl like you doing here tending bar? And I said, I'm just making a living, And it turned out to be my mentor, Peter McGregor Scott. He was editing Best Little Whorehouse in Texas over at Universal. Now, when I thought, oh, sure, this guy's trying to pick me up, this little redheaded girl, right? And he said, well, I'll come over and see what I do for a living. And he left a pass for me at Universal. And I thought, I hope it's not porn. That's all I could think of. I hope I'm not going to go watch some porn. And when I walked in,
as you drove onto the Universal lot, you thought that.
That's how naive I was, though. And so I remember it was the Alfred Hitchcock Theater, and I walked into this mixing soundstage, and I just thought, "Are you serious?" And so I took a seat and I stayed for the whole session. And afterwards, he said, "What do you think?" And I shook his hand, and I said, "When do I start? When do I start?"
Take us back to that moment. Now, okay, yes, as you said, you walked onto a major film studio lot, drove on, yes, naively thinking, God, they might make porno here. So you were in love with those images up on the screen. You wanted to be part of that process. You had really no idea how the process happened.
None.
And you walked into the door, and suddenly the reality of the process, and it's an amazing, complicated process filled with crap.
Well,
what was it? What was that first impression as you walked through that door?
I think I became that little 6, 7, 8-year-old girl again, like walking into the Warner Theater and then watching Peter work his magic, doing sound effects, music, and all of it piecing together. And I had a degree in English. I graduated with a degree in English, but it was just the complexity and watching him maneuver it like a conductor, watching him mix that, and then seeing Dolly Parton and Burt Reynolds on that huge screen, and then listening to these guys go, Peter would say, give me another eighth of a second on that, whatever, on that oboe. And I thought, how does he know that? It was just, so I guess my curiosity at that point said, I want to do what he does. I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to work with this guy and he's going to teach me a lot of stuff. And he did.
I imagine it also changed the way that you understood movies, if the next time you went to the movies, I can't imagine you watched or heard it the same way.
It took me a while to get to that point because I think the first time I worked with Peter, I was nervous because I didn't have a film education. So I had to learn everything from the ground. Like I didn't know what a grip was or a gaffer or what, back then in Avid, I didn't know what cutting film meant. I knew nothing. I remember telling me, could you order Dolly and track? And I just thought I was hello Dolly. I didn't know what it was.
Wow, it was really cold, really.
Yeah. Huh. And then so the first film I did with him, we had offices on Barham. If you're going up the hill, on that next to the liquor store, we had those cabins or whatever they were, bungalows. And I walked in and Peter was there with Cheech and Chong. And so the first film I did was Cheech and Chong Still Smoking. And that was my foray into the film business.
What did you do on the movie?
I was Peter's assistant, producer's assistant. And they filmed it outside of LA. And so a lot of it, I sat with the editors and the office people, and that's where I really learned. I asked the editors every question I could think of, like, what are you doing? How are you doing it? What does that mean, splicing? You can just cut that piece of film and put it back together. And that, I would call, if he would tell me to order track or things like that, I would call the companies And I would say, I know nothing about what I'm talking about. Can you teach me? So I wasn't afraid to look foolish. I wasn't, because I thought it was the only way I was going to learn. And they were so kind. Everybody was so kind to me. I think that's the most important thing I took out of all of my years in LA was I thought that, I mean, like working with you guys, everybody that I worked with, if we treated each other respectfully, like we still have a relationship today because we weren't those obnoxious screaming maniacs that we worked with. And I saw Peter lead, and I by example. I never saw Peter lose his temper. I never saw him berate anybody ever. And I thought that's the guy that I want to, emulate.
I guess your graduate degree was in obnoxious people when you went and worked for where we met, Mr. Silver.
Silver Pictures. It wasn't, Gil, actually. It was on a movie that Peter produced with a guy named Adam Fields.
Oh, yeah.
And it was called Whoopee Boys. It was a silly little movie with Paul Rodriguez
Yeah.
and Michael O'Keefe. And I had a little office between Peter on one side and Adam on the other. And Adam was a screamer.
Mm.
And I remember one time watching him throw a stapler at his assistant. And I just thought, are you kidding me? And so I walked into Peter's office and I said, this guy just threw a stapler at her, and he just said, well, that will never happen to you. If anything happens from that side of the room, let me know. But I think he was the first person that I saw go off the chains like that, and I just thought, what's wrong with him? What's he so insecure about that he has to act like that?
In retrospect, perhaps part of the oddity was that Peter accepted it.
Sure he did, because it was
accepted.
It was Paramount. I think we're at the Paramount lot, and I just, I was shocked because I thought he needs to be berated. He needs to be fired. He needs to apologize to that girl. What? And he didn't. None of it happened.
Outrageous male behavior had long since been accepted on that side of the camera. Really, was there obnoxious? Wasn't really a problem. It was even back then, it was celebrated to a degree. A woman certainly could never go anywhere near that. I mean, the last thing anyone wanted was to be difficult.
Well, it was only tolerated. It was only tolerated if they wanted something that they thought you had.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they wouldn't tolerate it. They just throw you away.
Mm.
But if you had something that they wanted, if Adam was producing something that they wanted, then they would tolerate it. And the bigger the person was in success with making money for the studios, the more opportunity they had and the more toleration the studios had with those kinds of people.
Indeed. Well, if you or I had tried to pull off that kind of shit, they'd have showed us the door very quickly. So, it's just as well we never tried to pull off that shit.
Well, but I think it goes more to your character too, don't you? I mean, I think,
God, I hope so.
No, I really do, because I mean, I've worked for some women that were not very nice either, and I refuse to be the person too. I guess I learned how not to act more than how to act.
In essence, conquering this town, this business, is a problem that we all solve in our own particular way. And, I think in the case of some women, they see that, all right, one way to do it is to emulate the men who do it. Why not? What have you got to lose when doing the opposite obviously is not how to play.
Right.
It's not, as a strategy, it's logical. It makes sense. And there are, it's hard. It's a hard thing to pull off. Some women do, but the margin for error is so non-existent. That's the problem. And that's not fair either.
No, and I think for me, starting out as I did, I was so curious. My mind was so curious about learning. So I almost, I think overdid it almost sometimes. I would stay and work 14 hours, 16 hours to learn something
Mm.
because I never wanted to be the girl in the office. Do you know what I mean? I didn't want to just be that girl, or for somebody to think, oh, she's cute and young, and so she must be sleeping with somebody, because that was going around too. And I said, yeah, no, that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. And I
You,
also think it was the beginning, I had an Italian father and three brothers, and they taught me street smarts from a little girl,
what
and
did your dad do?
my dad worked for General Electric, and then but he hated it, and then he became a coach at a university here, for about 37 years. He coached. My dad was an athlete his whole life, and he coached baseball, he coached golf, he played baseball, he was a basketball referee. I mean, he lived and breathed athletics, as did my three brothers.
Mm.
And I went, down that dark road of the arts.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yikes.
But getting back to our friend Joel, I first met him on Die Hard 2. So it got around LA as only it can that I was a pretty smart little cookie. And I quickly moved up to production coordinator on a lot of big films.
Mhm.
And one of them was Die Hard 2. And so we were filming that when our production offices were at Fox. So he was still at Warner's, so he wasn't there all the time. But when he came in the door, it was like, you guys know that because it was the pajamas. Remember the pajama outfits? And it was
Of
like,
course.
it was like the Matrix walking in the room. And
Our first assistant director on Bordello of Blood always referred to Joel as the pajamanator
yeah.
because he was Canadian, so he pronounced it pajamanator.
Yeah, but that was my first encounter with him, and that film had nothing but issues because it was snow, Christmas at snow, Die Hard 2, and everywhere we went, the snow melted. And so back then, this is pre-computers, right? So as a production coordinator, I'd get those 11 p.m. phone calls that we got to move the entire cast and crew to another city. And by the third move, I think I was like, somebody just blow my brain out, And we finally shot it in Moses, Washington. I think that was our final destination. And we had to rent a 737 or whatever the big plane was to get everybody there and the equipment and all of that. And I'll never, I just never forget it because it was crazy trying to, call. At that point, you had to call travel agents and say, I need, 250 people to move. We just couldn't do it. So what do? You rent a big old plane. You rent a big plane and go.
And that was because you were chasing snow.
Chasing snow. Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell you a funny story. Our production, everybody was scared to death of Joel. Everybody on the crew, probably the cast too. But I'll never forget, I got one of those 1 a.m. phone calls from our production designer, John Vallone, who unfortunately died some years ago. And so that 737 or 767, whichever it was that we rented, we used that as our plane. We had to paint the whole thing, put the new logo on it. And around 1 a.m, he called me and woke me up and he said, it's raining and the paint is dripping off the plane. And I said, what do you want me to do? Like, I'm a production coordinator. He goes, you have to tell Joel. I said, I'm not telling Joel. You call him and wait. Nobody would, they thought, I have some power here. I said, you guys call him and tell him. I'm not going to tell him that the plane we're shooting tomorrow, the paint's running off of it. But it was just, I was like, I'm not the fixer here. I can't be that person. But it just was shocking to me that, there was that aura of him, even on that film, that he was unapproachable because he'll kill you. He'll kill you if you make a mistake, And I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of that too.
We all have stories and scars.
Yeah. So after that movie, they offered me a job at Over Pictures and I turned it down. I turned it down because I didn't want to be an office person. I was always on a set.
What interactions did you have with Joel that made him reach out to you?
he would just see me work. And I think he saw that I didn't take too much crap from anybody, but that I also just put my nose down at the work. I wasn't trying to, make friends or influence people. I was a really hard worker. And I think it's part of, being a type A personality or something. I wanted to prove my worth maybe. And so he saw that, I guess.
I'm going to sidebar here for a second because you're making me think, Gil and I witnessed something where we once took a car ride with Joel, I think going into the second season, where we just had we were in pre-production on the second season. We just had to ask some questions, and we showed up at like 3:00 in the afternoon. It's cool at our heels. And finally, 6:00, he makes us go with him to his dentist so we could think we can finally have the conversation that we need to have about stuff. Right. And of course, he gets onto the phone as soon as he's into the goddamn car. And among the people that he calls is Donald Trump. And he invites Donald to do an episode of Tales from the Crypt. Send me your script, says Donald. Fuck him. We never sent him a script, I'm happy to say. Anyway, we get to the dentist, and still we haven't had a chance to talk to Joel. He said, come up to the office. We come up to the dentist's office. We sit in the office waiting for him to have the crown replaced. That is why we're going to the dentist. And when he comes out, the dentist pitches us an idea for Tales from the Crypt. We walk back down to the car. Still no time to do the ideas. We have to stop at his Frank Lloyd Wright house just above in WeHo. Before, I think there's some event that he's going to with his girlfriend at the time. I think it was Lisa. And we stop at the house. We still have not had a chance to talk to him. And if there's Gil, me, and Reggie, we're in the dining room as he heads in,
Reggie.
And he heads into the bedroom. And whatever he said to her, now you can hear everything. She starts to rip him several new assholes. And he is nothing but humming. And finally, he emerges from the bedroom and says, she's going to join me later. And we get back in the car and we drove in utter silence the rest of the way to Warner Brothers because obviously Joel was not going to talk to any. He had been reduced to nothing. His girlfriend did that. I'm wondering, okay, Joel's relationship with women, though he was a domineering bully, we heard with our own eyes, a woman reduce him to nothing. You might not know this, but you might, so I'm asking. What was his relationship with his mom?
He told me once in front of lots of people that I can't remember what movie was coming out. And he said, we've got to win the weekend. We've got to win the weekend. And I said, well, what if we don't? And he said, Jackie, I'd kill my own mother if I could win the weekend.
And then he did. And then he did. That's how he won the weekend.
And I just said, okay, then. All right. I said, no, you wouldn't. And he said, really? You don't think so? And that was it.
But he was drawn to you as someone he wanted to work for him.
Yeah.
Because you were a person who did not take a lot of shit. Once you went to work for him, it's not like you didn't change. You were exactly the same. I don't take no shit person. You always were. And he didn't fire you at the beginning. I mean, you left at the end of the day, jumping to the end of the story, you left of your own volition, didn't you?
Yes. He
did not fire you.
No, but I'll tell you a funny story about how he hired me. So that time I turned it down. And I think I went and I forgot it. I did a picture with Peter. And then after that, I went to Portugal with a friend of mine for a month. I said, I got to get out of this movie business. This is killing me. So I went to Portugal for a month. And this was, we got to remember, we didn't have all the technology that we have now. And my friend's son was one of those high divers that you see off the Acapulco. So he was doing a high diving show in the Algarve area of Portugal. And so we were there, and my hand to God one night late, because everybody goes out late in Europe, as you know. And there's a knock at the door, and they said, Jackie, there's a telegram for you. And I thought, oh my God, my mom or my dad. I mean, it was from Joel. It was from Silver Pictures. You have to call me. And I said, how did anybody find me? I'm not lying. And it was the number. And we had no phones there. We were in this rented house. And I had to go into the city the next day and call them. And it was about coming to join So Pictures again. And at that time, I said, well, I'm in Portugal. And when I get back into town, I'll give you a call. But he found me in Portugal.
And
I'm sure one of the assistants did.
at the time, Joel Silver was a very
Powerful.
powerful producer. He was huge. This is a huge, powerful producer, really jumping through hoops, or getting his people to jump through hoops rather than be screamed at, to find you.
Jackie, I once took a cruise in the Mediterranean, and I said to Joel, I'm going away for a week. He said, what do you mean you're going away for a week? Well, I said, I'm going away for a week. I just got to get away. I can't take. So he goes, okay, but I gotta get an international phone. I'll get it for you. You have to have an international phone. Now, in those days, an international phone was like the size of a suitcase. I mean, it was like it looked like a walkie-talkie, and you pull out the phone. It's like this big, and then you pull out the antenna.
Yeah.
So I said, Joel, I don't want to take a phone. He goes, no, you gotta take the phone. So I tell Jeannie, and she says, oh, okay, if you have to. So I take this phone on the boat, and I have to carry it with me. I take it out of the suitcase, and I'm carrying this big clunky phone, and it rings, and it's Joel. And he goes, I need you to get back here right away. I said, I can't get back. I'm on a boat. I'm on a cruise, Joel. I can't.
On the ocean.
I can't swim. I'm in the middle of the Mediterranean. No, you got to get back here. I go, Joel, I can't. So we hang up, and I put the phone back in the suitcase, figuring, okay, that's my phone call. I won't get any more. And I finish the cruise, and I go back to LA, and I go into the office, and he looks at me and he goes, where have you been? What happened to you? I thought the boat sank. I said, the boat sank? Why would you think the boat sank? He said, well, because I called you like a half a dozen more times, and there was no answer. And I said, really? Something must have been wrong with the phone.
My God. But it was that jump thing, that you need to jump when I tell you to jump.
Yeah.
And,
And we didn't.
And, no,
that's what caused a lot of problems for me with him, and our constant state of argument.
Yeah. Well, but you guys knew him longer than me. What do you think it was? I mean, do you think that was just temper tantrums from a childhood, or did you know? I don't know nothing about his childhood at all.
I have a memory, Gil, and maybe we had a conversation with Sharon Stone about Joel. And I remember she told us a story about his father, actually. And Joel, even back when he was a kid, among his idiosyncrasies, he was a collector of stuff. I guess, if I'm remembering the story correctly, he loved to go to garage sales and swap meets and stuff like that. And there were particular things he's looking for. I'm not entirely sure what, but there was an object that he had that his dad got rid of. And Sharon, there was I guess the question about Joel, figuring out Joel, it seemed to come up in that conversation. And what I vaguely recall her positing was this is his Rosebud sled explainer, that something in him, that something was taken away from him when he was a kid, and he was always trying to get it back. Well, first of all, Gil, do you remember this conversation? Am I making this up?
No, I think I remember it with Sharon. I do.
He likes stuff. Yeah. I mean, we know that. Lots of stuff.
There's a lot of Cain in the way he acquires houses, and yeah, absolutely stuff. He's on that. He's not quite on that scale, but I don't know.
Yeah, but this conversation isn't to psychoanalyze Joel. This is to psychoanalyze Jackie.
Yes, indeed. But
wrong with me? What was I thinking? No, I think, when I first started there, I had no idea what I was supposed to do. Because like I said, I never had worked in the office. I was always on set with Peter. And so they gave me this big office in the building, next to, we had those three buildings on the Warner lot. And I said, "What, Michael Levy then?" And, I said, "What am I supposed to do?" "Just go meet with Bill Young." Go meet with Bill Young. And I said, "Who the hell's Bill Young?" And he was the head of production for Warner's. So I'd meet with them and I'm like, "What the hell? I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here. And then all of a sudden the phone would just be ringing. And I realized, I think I was kind of the referee, but maybe the peacemaker, because oftentimes his office would say, "Joel wants you to return these calls." So when I got to talk to the people, I think that anger and craziness came out, and I had to kind of like smooth the water a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And
You,
so it was like, I was always the girl. I'm going to have my girl get back to you. I'll have my girl get back to you.
but you were more like a fixer.
I was the fixer.
Yeah.
I was the Liev Schreiber. What's it? Ray Donovan. But I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
kill.
yeah. Yeah,
I
yeah,
never
yeah.
killed people. Yeah.
Well, Mike
You know,
Mike Levy, Mike Levy in his own way was a fixer.
he was a fixer. Yeah, in a very bizarre way.
Yeah.
A very bizarre way. But that was, when you think about those three buildings, the dysfunction. I mean, you guys saw it. Those kids would be sitting at a desk at 9 o'clock at night, and I would be leaving because I was working on 5 pictures at the same time in Tales from the Crypt, looking at dailies, and I'd walk in, I go, "What are you kids doing here?" And he wouldn't let them go. They just sat at their desks, and I thought, what the hell is that control? What is that?
Well, I used to have a couple of occasions where those same kids were in the office and apparently waiting for me to contact them and give them some information, which I didn't know there was any urgency. And I would either get a call from one of them or I would call into the office and they would say, "Oh, Gil, can you just tell us this or that or the other?" And I go, "Why?" And they said, "Because we have to wait here until we hear from you." And I would say, "What? Go home. You don't hear from me. Go home. I'm telling you to go home. Okay. I'm telling you to go home." And they would do it. And sometimes I would hear about it. Like Joel would say, you can't tell them that.
Yeah.
And I would just laugh at him and go, "Yeah, I did. What do you mean I can't tell them that? I told them to go home. Watch my lips. Go home. You see, Joel, I just said it. I can say that." And they go home. And then he would say, "No, I don't want them to go." And then we would get it. And then he and I would get into a fight about it.
I have to say, besides all the criticisms, I learned so much from Peter about the job of making a film and what everybody did and what he did as a producer. So I learned a lot of all of that. But from Joel, I have to say, I learned about the art of making a deal. Like, I listened to his conversations, talking to agents in the studio and going back and forth, and they want this much, but we can only give it. So I learned the art of the deal from him.
Right.
He was a very brilliant businessman, and it was all about making that deal. And he did not like that word no, as you both know. That what do you mean you don't want to do my movie? And so from that was the part that I didn't learn from Peter, because Peter did that in a much quieter way.
Right.
But with Joel, that was really, he was a deal maker,
Yeah.
but it was just done in such a crazy
Crude
way.
A very crude way.
Yeah. Like those first couple of months, and they said, you need to be our eyes and ears on Tales from the Crypt. And I just remember, were you one of the first shows for HBO, or was HBO around for a bit? Because I don't remember.
They had done 2 shows before Tales from the Crypt. First and 10, which is football oriented,
Right.
and Dream On, Brian Benben's show.
I remember that.
Right. They were basically ordinary TV shows with tits and the word fuck. That's really all that differentiated them. They were still ordinary TV shows in every other respect. And then our executive producers, the Crypt partners, got together, and suddenly you had a bunch of Hollywood big shots saying, "We want to do a TV show, and every episode's a TV show. Every episode's a little feature film." Well, at that point, the movies were over here and TV was over here. They had nothing to do with each other.
Right.
If you, Tom Hanks would go from TV into movies, or Robin Williams would go to TV into movies. If you were heading in the other direction, it's because it was the end of your career. And so this was a radical departure, that movies on TV. We've told the story here at the screening, at the cast and crew screening. For the first 3 episodes, there was Donner's Dig This Cat, He's Real Gone, Walter's The Man Who Was Death, and all through the house, Bob's terrific episode. And after, I think, one of the episodes, a couple of crew are sitting talking. One of them says, "Wow, that's great TV." And the other crew member says, "That's not TV, it's HBO." And the HBO execs in the row ahead turned to look at them and went, "Oh my God." They had just heard, that became their slogan. And that was what Tales from the Crypt did for HBO. It took them, because this was not just a TV show. This was bigger.
It was a movie. I mean, they were movies, really.
Now,
when we started, though, I mean, when I started with you guys, were we in Venice first or the Valley first? I forgot.
I think we were in Venice.
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
then
At
the
the
Valley.
A1 Globe on Venice and Robertson,
right.
Right.
which is
And
now
then
in Albertson.
But I remember moving to the Valley, and it was easier for me because it wasn't so far to drive from Warner's,
Right,
But
right.
I think I told you guys that the first time I came on the set, it was such a finely run machine. But I was in awe of the Crypt Keeper, with Kevin Yeager's, Crypt Keeper, and John Kassir and all of that. It was something that I'd never seen before. And I thought, this is pretty astounding. And so when I went back, he said, "What are you going to tell me? What are you going to report? What's going on?" I said, "They don't need my help at all. I'll look at the dailies every day, and if I see anything that you need to know about, I'll let you know." But the other thing that really opened my eyes to it that you guys did is created A-list actors to go to HBO. I got calls from every agent in town to be on Tales. Everybody wanted to be on your show, and they were.
Well, that's one of the things we told Joel. We said, and we want to go after stars. And he said, "You're not going to get stars because HBO is not going to give you any breakage." And I said, "Did I say anything about breakage?" I said, "I want them to be on the show because I'm going to go after actors." "Well, what are you going to do? How are you going to get them?" I said, "I'm going to give a dramatic actor a comedic part, and a comedic actor a dramatic part. And I'm going to kill somebody who's never been killed before." And he looked at me and he said, "That's not going to work. You're never going to get anybody." I said, I want to try. I need you to say, I can do that. And if you say no, then, go get somebody else to do the show, because I really want to do that. I think we can do that." And finally he just said, "I don't care what you do. Just, you got to make up the $1 million from last year, and you got to make these little half-hour movies."
Because I remember just Joel and Donner being influential. I don't really remember Zemeckis or Walter Hill, or I don't even remember who was the fifth guy?
David Giler,
Yeah.
who's no longer with us now. No, Walter would direct, Bob would direct, but they had nothing to do with the show, really. And Dick and Joel really were involved with running the show from the perspective of talking to me and Alan, and from their offices being so close together on the lot.
Right.
And Matt, what was Matt
Tabak
was walking point for Silver Pictures, and Scott Nimmerfro walk point for Dick.
Yeah.
Because we went aboard at the beginning of the 3rd season, because the 2nd season was a chaotic mess that went $1 million over budget, and there was no deficit partner. So HBO had paid for it out of their pocket. Then, the night before the cast and crew part of the wrap party, that's when the executive producers were handed the financials and saw that there were $1 million in the hole. "Get out your checkbooks, boys." They canceled the wrap party. and then they fired everybody.
You boys, that'll show you.
That's going to make up the $1 million.
there was one more year on the contract, and so Gil and I were supposed to see it out, but we never saw it that we never saw it that way. And
Yeah.
you know, our whole approach was to reinvigorate as much as we possibly could, as Gil said. And my question, as when Barry Josephson finally walked into the room after making us wait for an hour, was, hey, what does the crypt keeper do when he punches the clock at the end of the day and he goes home to his crypt? All right, what are his friends? What are his likes and dislikes? What does he have for dinner? What does he watch on TV? Who are his friends and pals? And you know, the first 2 seasons, he was a puppet with a great voice, but no interior life. And that's
Right.
what we, perversely, people have tried to redo Tales from the Crypt. There's been a desire to redo Tales from the Crypt the past couple of years. M. Night Shyamalan tried to redo Tales from the Crypt. I think he got, what did he get, an option on the comics? And he didn't understand the franchise.
Yeah.
The EC comics are very important. That's the source material. But it wasn't until the Crypt Keeper became the Crypt Keeper, and that started in season 3, that suddenly Tales from the Crypt became the franchise that it is today. And though M. Night had access to the comic books, the Crypt Keeper in the comic books is an old white guy with stringy hair.
Mm-hmm.
Separate piece of IP, the puppet and the voice and the interior life that Kevin, John, Gil, and I created. And so what no one really understands is that really the EC comics aren't the franchise, the Crypt Keeper is. And whoever controls the Crypt Keeper really controls the franchise, and that, alas, is Joel.
No kidding.
That's why there's never been a new version of it. I mean, I've been asked by the estate over the past 20 years to bring it back, that they would support that because I had a great relationship with Bill Gaines, and they said,
Right.
"Oh, my dad loved you. I mean, he just loved the two of you." And I said, "But do you really have the rights? Because I don't." And they said, "Yes." And of course, they didn't have the rights, and it got
Oh
into
my
a
God.
real. It was just a mess. And then M. Night, Alan, was brought in by TNT because they were bullshitted into thinking that the rights were available.
Oh no!
And they lost,
Okay.
and they lost like over $1 million paying M. Night. And then one day they get a phone call saying, "You guys don't have the rights."
Oh my gosh. Because, it's very funny. I'm on the film board here of Northwestern Pennsylvania.
We have
Every
questions about that. We're going to get to that.
every October we do a horror film festival called Erie, EERIE, Erie Horror Film Festival. And I was like, God, I would love to get the Crypt Keeper to come to that, because it's just it's such a great thing to watch these. I mean, it's crazy to me because the first year, I think this will be my 3rd year, and I've been sponsoring the Best of the Fest film, and I give a money award. And last year it was from somebody from Spain, so we're getting people from all over the world doing these horror films, and it's really interesting.
When do you do that?
We're going to be this year, it'll be at the Warner Theater, the wonderful Warner. And I think this year it's October 3rd and 4th. And I was like, maybe we could do something with you two guys, do a Zoom or something. And, just be these kids just eat it alive. They eat it alive because
Oh, we know.
Erie is not known for its as a film mecca, but they're starting, and there's some really talented young filmmakers here that I've been. In fact, I have a meeting with after our talk. I'm going to go meet with them because they wrote a script, and I said, "How much money do you think you have to film? It's going to be a very low budget." And I said, "Well, why don't you add 10 to the end of that zero? Another 10 zeros, because the script you just wrote is huge, And so I'm trying to show them that you cannot have 4,000 extras in a low budget film. Do you know what I mean? But I really love working with them because you just see the desire that I had in my eyes. And I thought today, maybe that's why I came back. Maybe I came back to help these kids, pursue their dreams like Peter helped me. And when I lost Peter was in a horrible taxi accident in New York several years ago. And when he died, a part of me died because Peter not only changed my life, I think he saved my life. He gave me purpose. And so maybe, I'm not going to be so esoteric. I love working with the young filmmakers because they just want to know what we do.
Yeah.
And we're kind of old to them. You know what I mean? We did this before cell phones and, we did those big black breakdown sheets. Do you remember that? The strip boards and everything.
Sure.
And it's lovely working with them. And I thought how great it would be for you guys to work with us one year because I just would
The
love
answer is
it.
yes.
Okay, good. I would love you
An
to.
unequivocal yes. I think I'm speaking for both of us. Yes, Gil?
Well, maybe. I don't know. I'd have to talk to Jackie about the terms of us, I have to give her a little Joel back,
You have to give me, you can get paid the same thing I do, which is a big fat zero. But it's just so lovely because some of them come in and complete, what do they call it now? When they would dress as characters, what's it called?
Cosplay.
Yeah, cosplay. And the first time, the lobby of the Warner Theater, they have vendors, and I see all this cosplay, and these kids just want to talk. They just, this podcast from Pittsburgh they wanted to talk to me about you guys. They wanted to talk about Tales from the Crypt, and we shared stories. So I think it would be wonderful. But getting back our little Joel is, I'll tell you another funny story. I was living in Santa Monica at the time with my dog and my boyfriend, and we had shot on the lot at Warner Brothers a piece with Madonna. Now I'd worked with Madonna on Dick Tracy, so I got to know her pretty well because she used to come and use my little trailer space to conduct her business, and I think she's probably one of the smartest business women I've ever heard on the phone. And so we shot this piece with her, and I got a call Sunday morning from Joel. As you know, you're available 24 hours a day. He said, I need you to come to my house, the house in West Hollywood, and pick up this gift and take it to Madonna. And I said, on a Sunday, what do you think Madonna is? We're not like, she's not on my phone list. You know what I mean? And he goes, no, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Well, we had used a whole bunch of Harry Winston jewelry at the time for this shoot. So we had millions and millions and millions of dollars of jewelry. And so he decided that Warner Brothers should buy her a piece as a thank you for doing the thing. So I said to my boyfriend, we got to go to Joel's. We got to go pick up this piece of jewelry. We got to take it to Madonna's house. And he goes, are you kidding me right now? And I said, no. So we went to Joel's and he gave me this box and it was beautifully wrapped. And so we could never do it today with paparazzi and everything. So we drove to her house and, security was there. And I said, hey, it's Jackie George from, Warner Brothers. And I have a gift from Joel Silver. And I got to the door and her maid said, she's in the shower. Can you come back in a half an hour? And so we drove around, went to have a coffee or something and came back. And she couldn't have been nicer, but she came down in a robe and her hair in a turban. And I said, she goes, what are you doing? What are you doing here? I said, Joel wanted me to give you this gift. And so she opened it up and it was gorgeous. It was this gorgeous, beautiful bracelet. And she said, well, don't go away. I want to give him something. So she comes up from down upstairs and a copy of her sex book. Remember that book she did, that tabletop book or whatever it was, with that real set. And she took a silk kerchief and wrapped it and gave it to me and said, no, I need you to take this to Joel. And I go, what the hell? I'm not like the Pony Express here, on my Sunday off. And so I drove the damn thing back over to his house. And I said, okay, I'm going to go now. And he goes, where are you going? And I said, I'm going home. It's Sunday. Oh, don't go. Because, he never wanted to be alone. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
He never liked being alone. And so I said, no, my boyfriend's in the car. My dog's at home. I got to go. So here's your gift. And, but I'll never forget. It was like you had to be available 24 hours a day. And even at night when I would feel guilty about leaving at 7, after being there for 12 hours. And I said, okay, I'm leaving. I'll see you tomorrow. Where are you going? Home. Why? Why are you going home? I said, well, my dog's there. Bring your dog to work. I started bringing my big black lab to work every day because I felt guilty about leaving him home so often, but he never wanted me to leave. He never wanted anybody to the office. So that was you
He's
know.
he's like a kinder Jeffrey Dahmer.
Maybe.
That was Jeffrey Dahmer's explanation why he ate them. He just didn't want them to leave.
I do want them to leave. Well, I got up without that happening, but it was just, it was, I don't know. I often wonder how did we withstand it though? Why do you think we did it? Why did we put up with it? That's a question.
I'm not so sure. My situation, I think, was a little different because, we worked together for, I think, 12 or 14 years on a lot of different projects. And yet the relationship never really changed. It was always confrontational. In fact, my wife tells the story where, she would always know the phone would ring. She would know if I was talking to Joel because my decibel level would go up 50 points. And the whole conversation was an argument.
Yeah.
And, I would walk out on him. I would just go home. I would just say, I'm leaving,
Gotcha.
and I would, I once left a set downtown LA. We were making a movie called Double Tap with Stephen Ray and Heather Locklear. And, I just got really mad about something with Joel, and I just said, I'm leaving. You can come out, you can come down and run, watch it yourself. And you can't do that. And we got into this big argument and I just left. And, nothing happened. And the next day it was like nothing happened. I was waiting for me to come in and got fired or tell me, whatever. And it was just, we just continued on. So it was an odd situation. I mean, my relationship with him was always very precarious and always confrontational.
I do have to say though, on Richie Rich, we shot at the Biltmore Estate in North Carolina, and then we went up to Chicago to do stage work. And at that point, I was told to hire Karen Fields. Do you remember Karen? And I said to her, "You're going to marry him." I said, "He's in love with you. He's been in love with you as long as I've worked there." And they did, as you know, they did get married.
Yeah. And they have two big kids.
2 kids. But I said, there's a reason I'm hiring this girl to work in wardrobe that's never worked in wardrobe her whole. She worked for Steve Perry for a bit.
Yeah.
Remember him?
Yeah.
But I knew they were going to get married. I really did. And I saw it, and they did. And I just thought,
what was it in her that made you think what she could tame him?
He was in love with her. No, I could just see, like when he said, "You got to get that girl on the crew, get this," and it just, something sparked that I knew that he just had the hots for her. And I think it wasn't just a sexual thing. I think there was really some connection. And I told her that. She goes, "You're crazy." And I said, I'm telling you, you two are going to get married one day. I just saw it. But here's another funny story on Richie Rich. So he didn't come off because he and Macaulay Culkin's dad they didn't get along very well. So I was the producer on set, right? And he would come to set, and he would fly in John Davis's dad's private plane, because John was the co-producer. And he came to set one day and he said, "Jackie, so order me that beef jerky that I like." And I just looked at him, I go, what are you talking about? What? I don't order beef jerky. I don't eat beef jerky. I don't know what beef jerky. He said, "Yeah, on that movie that I did like 5 years ago, they ordered me really good beef jerky from North Carolina." I said, "You got 45 assistants. Talk to one of them. I don't know from this beef jerky. Like, leave me alone." So, but it was just like, it was like stuff they pull out of their butt, like, "Get me that beef jerky." You know what I mean? And I'm like trying to wrangle Macaulay Culkin to remember his lines because, he was 13 years old and his father was nuts. And you know what I mean? It was just beef jerky really in the middle of this. I thought, what the hell is that about?
The juxtapositions could be
maniacal,
staggering.
It's funny. I just saw an interview that Macaulay Culkin did with, I think it was Barbara Walters talking about his childhood. And that on the film, I saw the divisiveness and the disgusting habit of a child actor. Like that kid, at the rap party, we had a rap party at House of Blues in Chicago. And I said to him, I just want to take you home with me and let you have a normal life. I just felt so sad for that young kid.
Mm.
And he talked about that a lot in the Barbara Walters interview about, like those kids don't even talk about the father anymore. And that was one of the things I think that was mind blowing to me, that what we allowed happen, like we said earlier, for the love of money, as long as the film was going to make money. And I felt maybe it was a maternal instinct, even though I never had kids, I never wanted kids, but I would watch this kid, I would see the angst in his face because of his father's actions. And then coming on a set where maybe he didn't know the lines. He was never allowed to read a script. They never let him read a script. They just would do lines with him the night before, and he was supposed to go to set and know everything. And but that was one of the things for me that I thought, why are we doing this? Kid's 13 years old. Why are we ruining this child's life?
There's a law, the Coogan law, which they had to create legislation because this business was so abusive toward a young performer, and their parent was so abusive toward them too.
Well, he was the breadwinner. He was
of course,
the winner for all 7 children, and the mother and the father. Same thing happened on Dick Tracy, the kid that played the kid. His parent, he got cast. My mom was on. That was one of the times my mom came to set, and she was so excited because Warren Beatty actually called me over, and the only reason he called me over is he said to the hair and makeup people, "That's the color hair I want him to have." Was my color hair. And I said, "Mom, trust me, he doesn't even know my name, so it's no big deal." But that kid too, his parents brought him to the set. They rented an apartment at what were those, Oakwoods, right? And they hired some young 20-year-old kid to be his guardian. They never even met before. And that was the other kid that I thought, they just dropped this kid off in Hollywood, and let him do this movie. But, at that time, the parents, they're allowed to take 20%, right? Or something with the Coogan law.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever use kids in Tales, or was it always adults? I don't remember any children.
We must have used kids, but I don't remember
Very,
specifically.
very, very infrequently. I can't even think of.
Yeah.
We just didn't write scripts that had them in there because, the subject matter was just too dicey. They were ancillary,
and the rules of work were kind of difficult. The hours.
Labor law.
Yeah, so I think we stayed away from that.
Yeah, there would have had to have been a really good reason to do that. Even when we would do.
However, we always thought we were dealing with kids, even though their age might have been far succeeding ours.
They were 45. Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Ke Huy Quan. We hired Ke Huy Quan. There was that episode. That was that first season. So you were part of that. Michael. Oh God, that was Undertaking.
Michael Thaw.
Michael Thaw directed. Yeah, it was it Undertaking Powler? Might have been. I think it was the episode. And that was, oh God, he was Benny Thaw's kid, and that was a favor to Donner.
Right.
Because Michael, I guess, had worked in the editing room somewhere, and
and Donner knew his dad really well.
Yeah, and best laid plans. The executive producers used Tales from the Crypt as a directing boot camp. If they did. Yeah, if they wanted to try a favor to somebody, or they wanted to try out a writer who they might want to, maybe the writer could direct, we would be the boot camp, can they, can't they? Or in a lot of cases, Gil was really good at teaching novices how to get through the basics of directing.
How about Joel's directing?
Well, that's oh my God, that was holy shit.
I thought, oh, poor Gil. Poor Gil.
That was typical. That was the epitome of having to school an unschooled director who had
Did
no
you
interest.
ever did you ever hear the story I tell about that? Because I would go to Joel and he was going to direct. I said, Joel, on this show, you're the director. You're not the executive producer, and you have to listen to me. You understand that? And he would say, yeah. Get out of here. Yeah. So we get on the set, and he had to have Jan de Bont as the DP. He couldn't use the DPs that we had.
Of course.
So I said to Jan, he said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of everything. Don't worry about it. And so we get on the set, and I said to Joel, now listen, we take the show very seriously. So we don't allow cell phones. We don't allow phone calls. You can't be, I need your full attention to directing. Yeah. I got it. So we get on the set, his phone rings and he answers it. And I go, put it away. He goes, he waves me off. I go, Joel, put the phone away. He goes, I'm on the phone. What's the matter with you? I said, no, you're on the set directing an episode of Tales from the Crypt. That's more important than whatever that phone call is. So stop. I'm not going to stop talking until you hang up. And he hangs up and he gets really mad at me and he goes back to the set. And, we would do this almost daily. And then we got into an argument because he said, if I didn't know better, I'd fire you on the spot right now. And I'd go, Joel, you can't fire me right now. Right now, you're a director on the show. I can fire you. You can't fire me. Next week, if you like, you can fire me, but not this week. This week, you're a director and you listen to how we make our show. And we would get into these crazy arguments on the set in front of everybody about how, no, you work for me this week. You can't fire me till next week. And Jan de Bont would just stand there looking at me going, just don't get so emotional about this. Just don't get so worked up. Leave him alone. Leave him to me. I'm directing the show for him, basically. And eventually I sort of, said, what do I care?
My dad once said to me that I had more balls than all three of my brothers put together. Maybe he was right, but I remember when I first started at Warner Brothers in Silver Pictures, and after a couple of months of being, in the office and reading 14 scripts a week, going, what the hell is this job? I remember we got the green light for Demolition Man, and I walked into his office and I said, "Okay, you got a minute?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "So this Demolition Man movie?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "I'd like to co-produce it with you." And I thought, where in the hell am I getting the balls to say this? And he goes, "All right." He did. He said, "All right." And he goes, "I'll tell you one thing though. You want to be a producer, start acting like a producer." And I said, "What does that mean? What does that mean?" I said, "I'm not going to act like you. That's for sure. I don't have that temperament." And I said, I'll do me, you do you, but he actually let me do it. And I mean, I did, I really cut my teeth on that and I learned so much. But a funny story is we decided that we had to go to Italy because Stallone was cast in Demolition Man. So I think we either took the Warner jet or Tom Cruise's jet. Don't ask. I don't know. So it was me, Joel, and our costume supervisor, Nick. I remember his name, Nick. And so we go to Rome, and Stallone was like the Pied Piper. I mean, everywhere Stallone went, there were of people following him. And I said, okay, this is what it's like. And then Stallone said, we're going to go to Lake Como because Gianni Versace wants to do the clothes, on Demolition Man. And I just said, Gianni Versace, like, what are we talking about? So anyway, we went to bed in Rome, right? And we're going to go to Milan and take the boat over to Lake Como. So that night, the production manager, line producer, Jim Herbert, God bless him, woke me up again because of the time difference. And he said, I just turned the budget into Billy Young. And was there 10 or 14 million over budget? And I said, it's like 3:00 in the morning. What do you want me to do? He goes, you need to tell Joel. I said, you need to tell Joel. You're the line producer, right? And I said, I'll tell him in the morning. I was half asleep. So I made sure I woke up at 7 a.m. He was already downstairs with Lee Simpson, who was an executive from Warner Brothers. Jim Henson was her father, I believe.
Yeah, sure.
So he started screaming bloody murder because the studio had gotten to him before I could get to him. about the overage on the budget. I mean, it was insanity, insanity screaming. And finally I said, are you done? What do you, and they started yelling at me some more. I said, Joel, if I made a mistake, I made a mistake. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I should have woke you up. I don't go to a man's hotel room at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not a dumb girl. And I didn't want to wake you up. And it went on. And finally I said, I made a mistake. Let it go. Let's move on. We can't fix this right now. We're in Italy. He's in LA. We'll figure it out. But taking it out on me, I mean, the overages are the overages, you know, maybe this trip to Lake Como is not the best thing we could be doing on the budget, you know? And I'll never forget that, but it was like, what the hell is this my fault? You know, it
While
was like someone,
while he's in the middle of indulging his actor, which he
yes.
does not have to do at any point. Joel could be the adult in that room. He could be.
So we get on the plane to Milan and we take a boat over to Lake Como. And I met Gianni Versace. We had lunch outside this 14th century villa. He couldn't have been sweeter. He gave me a tour. He found out I was half Italian. Gave me a tour of his place. And we met with his sister and his sister's husband who managed it. And when they told me how much the wardrobe budget was going to be, I said, Joel, we can't use Gianni Versace. There's no way. There's no way. It's Gianni Versace. But I still have hanging in my office at home. He wrote me the sweetest letter, Gianni Versace. Called me Jacquelina. You know, he wrote me a beautiful letter. And when he was killed, I was so, you know, really broke my heart because he was such a kind gentleman. But I'll never forget that. And when Nick and I got on the plane to fly back to Rome, we had to fly back commercial, you know, God forbid, right? I said, what the hell just happened? Like, what are we doing? This movie is $15 million over budget, and we're having lunch at Gianni Versace house in Lake Como, and it's my fault. You know, it became my fault. And I was like, wow, okay.
Everything was your fault. Everything was my fault. You know, it was always that way. You know, they took no responsibility for anything. It's always you did it. And I would be sitting there going, I did what exactly? I didn't even know about this was happening.
We've told the story here several times of when Joel just went too far and Gil finally said that's enough and he almost broke Joel's phone. We've told that story. What was your okay, Joel?
My final straw?
That's enough. Yeah. What was the final straw that broke it?
My final straw was in the production office in Chicago of Richie Rich. And that was probably, I don't know, the end of my reign there. I was on my third year of my 3-year contract. Now I had been up all night and it was 11 o'clock at night the next day. And I was waiting for script pages. And, you know, back then we had to Xerox them and slide them on their actors' doors, right? And at 11 o'clock, it was me and the production coordinator and a PA. And his assistant said, he's at dinner. I said, I don't care where he is. You have to get him. You need him to get on a phone and talk to me. Nothing. So finally I called back again and I don't remember who was on the desk. And I said, listen, I'm going to fall asleep on this desk. And this movie, we have no script for tomorrow's shoot. So he finally calls me. I'm in the, you know, screaming. I'm in the middle of this beautiful dinner. And I've been up for 24 hours. We have no script for tomorrow. I need your approved pages. And he said, you'll get my fucking, you know, pages when I'm ready to send them to you. And I said, first of all, I'm tired. Please stop screaming at me. I'll scream, you know, in his voice, you know, the rumbling voice. I'll scream at you if I want to. And I said, Joel, please just fax me those pages. I got to get these to the actors. It's not fair. So it went on. And he wouldn't stop screaming. And I said, I'm going to hang out until you can lower your voice. And I hung up the phone. You know, 2 seconds later, another phone call. Joel's on the phone, going, nobody hangs up on me. Nobody hangs up on me. I said, well, I did because nobody talks to me the way you're talking to me. And I said, I'm your person here. I'm trying to make the best movie possible for you. And I just want pages to give to actors, the director, the crew. And once again, he just started his tirade. And I said, Joel, I'm gonna hang up. I'm not hanging up on you. I'm telling you, I'm going to hang up and I'll wait for the pages. The next phone calls, you're fired, screaming, you are fired. Get out of there, get on a plane. I said, you can't fire me. My contract's with Warner Brothers. And I said, I will finish this film. And if we can hire, if we can treat each other respectfully, we can never have this conversation again. But please get me those pages and I will get those scenes done tomorrow. And eventually I got the pages. I finished the film and I went back and I told whoever, that Steve guy in the office, remember? I said, I will not be renewing my contract. I went to Bill Young and I said, I will not be renewing my contract. And his words to me were, how did you last so long? How did you last so long? And
Yeah.
that was the end of it. And I do believe, I don't know if it's true. I do believe I was blacklisted for a while. I do believe that. I think he put out, even though I was his girl and I was the girl that got the job done, I think he did put out some shit about me. And then shortly after that, Peter was hired to produce Batman and Robin, and he brought me on. And but it was tough. That was a tough, staying there and having to finish my contract out because the vitriol was horrible, as you both know. And I thought, what did I do wrong?
Right.
Just I did my job as best as I could do, and I just didn't deserve to be. And I thought nobody is going to talk to if I don't ever work again. As long as I can't let him speak to me like that. I just couldn't. Gil stood up to him. I stood up to him. And the only thing he could think of is to fire us. But then he needed me to finish the film. So I stayed there. I stayed in my building and he stayed in his, and that's the way it was. But I saw that and I thought, this is on me now. I can't let this happen. And it was a tough road after that. I thought for sure, what the hell am I going to do? I was still young, I was like, what am I going to do? But I found work. I got work after that. I went over to Scott Rudin's once because I was help. Do you remember the kid that worked for Scott? Do you remember that at all? I can't think of his name, but I remember I had to go to Scott Rudin's for something. I think they wanted me to break a script down or something. And I saw the same behavior from that office. And I thought his name was Adam. His assistant was Adam. And I just said, oh, Adam, don't let him do this to you. Don't. Luckily, I never had a Harvey Weinstein moment. I think, I think that I would have kneed him in the groin so hard. I don't think that, I just was feisty. So I'm grateful that never happened, but I was also smart. Like, I'm not delivering pages at 3 a.m. to your hotel. I'm not stupid. You guys were so good, the integrity that you had and treated people so nicely. I mean, I really thought that. At least you treated me very fairly because I had no idea what the hell I was doing with Tales from the Crypt, But you guys were really you really taught me about episodic television because I'd never done it before, and it was such a cool thing. And when I got to see Kevin Yeager's workshop and stuff, it was just like, to this day, I mean, I've called Kevin a couple of times for some help on some small, independent films to make a couple of pictures and stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Have you ever heard any more horror stories or just stay out of that kind of life?
I think we stay out of that kind of life. I've always, there have been incredible opportunities along the way that we've totally rejected, and we've totally sort of gone the other way or looked the other way and not gotten involved in it ourselves because that wasn't something that, we were interested in. We were always very interested and very passionate about telling stories,
Yeah.
making it as good as possible, making it better than anybody else could make it. And that was really what would motivated us. It really wasn't anything else. And mainly my arguments with Joel and other people have always been about that.
It's never been about the deal or the money or the power. It's been about the story. And alas, that puts us into an unfortunate position because I guess we'll never be a Joel. But then the good news is we'll never be a Joel.
That's good. I think that's good. And for me, it was the same thing. I never cared about making them millions of dollars. I wanted to make a decent living, you know, and do this thing, do really good work. And that I will forever be indebted to Peter McGregor Scott for, because I didn't ever see him ever cross the line. He never crossed the line ever that I saw. And it was very funny because Peter loved redheads. And I said to him, I think I'm the only redhead in Los Angeles that you haven't dated, because he was more like an older brother to me, you know, just, but never, you know, people always ask me, they thought, oh, you guys must be sleeping together. And I was like, he's like my brother, you know. No, that's not what I was there for. I was never there to be that girl, you know. I just wanted to learn. I wanted to be the girl sitting in the Warner Theater at 7 years old, learning how this all happened. And it, you know, my dreams came true. I was very lucky, but I never became, you know, one of these big, huge, you know, Lauren Schuler Donners. I never became that, but my career was pretty amazing. And I'm really grateful for it. And I think you guys too, you know. Remember, I mean, I just remember had such fond memories of Roger Reed. Do you remember Roger
Of
from
course.
HBO?
Yeah.
I mean, when I
I
found,
did.
you know, I used to go visit him, and then he got sick, and when he passed away, my heart broke, because
Yeah.
those are my people, you know what I mean? I didn't want to go, I never wanted to hang out with Joel and Don and stuff. I wanted to hang out with you guys and with Roger Reed and, you know, the DPs and stuff. I wanted to be, that was like, I was like one of the crew people, you know, even though I got a producer credit, I really wanted to hang out with the people, you know, go have a
Yeah.
beer, have you know, and that was for me. I didn't care about going to the restaurant, you know. You know, I have the stories of meeting Johnny Versace. That's very cool and everything. But, you know, everybody said to me, why didn't you keep in touch with Stallone? And why didn't you keep in touch with Arnold? Because I worked with them all. And it was just, that wasn't my thing. You know, I mean, they were wonderful to be with. And like George Clooney on Batman and Robin, I couldn't have worked with a nicer actor in my life. But that wasn't what it was about for me. I would
Right.
hang out with, you know, which I think you guys probably did too, you know. I
Yeah.
love the DPs. I loved learning all the different stuff, the lighting. And I remember working on Dick Tracy when Vittorio Storaro came over from Italy with his light board. And that's who I hung out with. I hung out with him and the Italians because they like, once again, liked me because I was an Italian girl, you know. I'd go out to dinner with those guys almost every night. They'd take me out to dinner, and I'd learn all these great things about lighting and his whole only using primary colors on Dick Tracy. And in fact, he gave me, I still have it, a signed book about his work as a DP. And I thought, well, that's great, but it's all in Italian. I have no idea what it says, you know, but I mean, those were my people, you know, those were my people.
Among our executive producers, while Joel was always a challenge, Dick was a pleasure.
He was a doll.
Yeah, one episode he threw a curveball at us at the last second, but okay. But Bob was a pleasure to work for. The most wonderful collaborator of all. Really, everything that I know about collaborating, I learned at that man's feet.
Yeah.
He really understood and understands how to get the very best out of everyone he's working with.
Yeah.
A very
And
opposite approach from Joel's.
I love Donner, and I always asked him, Dick Donner, I used to say, how can you be friends with him? Because he was just like a big teddy bear. And I remember he'd invite me into his motorhome, and he had the massage chair. And he'd say, go sit in that chair for 20 minutes. You're a nervous wreck. And I'd sit in the massage chair, and I'd say, how can you be friends with him? He goes, I don't take him seriously. You know, there was a mutual respect, but Joel would never, ever speak to Donner like that. Never.
Really not. There
was real respect between Joel had for Donner. He really did, you know. But Dick Donner was a real mensch, as they say, right?
Really,
and yet it ended quite badly between Joel and Dick. They got into an argument about money, and Joel accused Dick of stealing money. And, you know, I, being quite friendly with both of them and quite in their presence a lot, sort of got in the middle and tried to say, Dick, Joel wouldn't steal money from you. Why would he do that? He's got enough money. And then I became, from both sides, I got hit on from both of them in terms of being mad at and yelling at. And finally I said, you know something, you guys are crazy. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah.
Leave me alone. You guys figure it out or don't. But I mean, that's sort of how their relationship was. But it ended very badly, where they wouldn't talk to each other, and it was just sad.
This has been a wonderful hour and a half. You know, there's so much more to talk about, because really, I would also love to talk about the mentoring you've been doing the past couple of years at the Greater Erie Film Office, the Erie Horror Fest. We'd love to hear about that.
Last year, we had George Romero's wife and daughter at the Horror Film Festival,
Nice.
and it went over huge, and it was really interesting. It was really, really interesting. And we know we had, like, you know, directors and producers from Children of the Corn, and, you know, lots of old, we had the original, my God, I'm just forgetting the name of it. Nosferatu.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
And we had the organist playing. We brought in the organist for the Erie Philharmonic and the Theater, and he did the score live while we filmed Nosferatu. In the background, that's a picture of me and Peter McGregor Scott at a wrap party on a Steven Seagal movie. That's me having way too many cocktails, dancing alone, and me picking up this young man and dancing with him too. And a friend of mine did those paintings for me and sent them to me. And I just was like, well, you should have probably had a few more cocktails, because look at you. Yes. So, but no, I would love to talk some more. Let's do it again.
We've scratched the surface, Jackie, and I'm so glad you shared those pictures with us. I wish we could zoom in on them.
But that's another person we can talk about, Mr. Steven Seagal.
Oh, so many.
I did them all, worked with them all, let me tell you.
Like I said, we've just scratched the surface. Thank you so much, Jackie. It
was great to talk to you. Now I get to go meet with my young filmmakers.
Say hello for us, and Jackie, it was a delight to see you again. You know, it's been so many, so long since we've seen each other. So thanks for doing this, and again, so great to see you.
You too. Have a great afternoon and the rest of your day, and a nice weekend.
Okay. Well, you too, Jackie. Thank you for everyone for joining us. We'll see you next week. The How Not to Make a Movie podcast is executive produced by me, Alan Katz, by Gil Adler, and by Jason Stein. Our artwork was done by the amazing Jody Webster, and Jason Jody, along with Mando, are all the hosts of the fun and informative Dads from the Crypt podcast. Follow them for what my old pal the Crypt Keeper would have called terrific crypt content.